He is the scariest man in the world. There's nobody in the world like this guy.
Velasquez is a real deal, a proven commodity.
Cain Velasquez has been released by WWE.
So they just felt like they weren't using me enough and they were paying me too much, so they had to let me go. So I understand that. It's business.
Throughout the history of combat sports, there have been many notable names who have made the jump to pro wrestling and vice versa with varying degrees of success. But perhaps one of the most infamously failed attempts in recent memory was Cain Velasquez's short and mostly forgotten stint in WWE. So what exactly happened? How can a legend who once destroyed Brock Lesnar to win the UFC heavyweight title end up just having one embarrassingly short match and be released by WWE in less than a year? For us to really understand where it all went wrong, let's look back at his storied MMA career. Cain began his mixed martial arts journey shortly after college, debuting on October 7th of 2006 at Strikeforce's Tank vs Buentello event. With a background in amateur wrestling, he quickly put everyone on notice, using a ground and pound style to beat his opponent in the first minute of the first round. He would follow this up with another strong showing at Bodog Fight St. Petersburg, getting another knockout victory in the first round. It would take more than a year before Cain would get his next fight, but this time at the biggest stage possible, making his UFC debut on April 19th of 2008. Going up against another newcomer in Brad Morris, he decided to make a name at the expense of his opponent by knocking him out in the first round, marking the beginning of his rapid ascent to the top. After securing impressive victories again in his next two fights, the latter of which awarded him with the knockout of the night, Cain was pitted against veteran Czech Congo at UFC 99, where he would infamously land 251 strikes to win by unanimous decision. He was initially scheduled to face one of the hardest hitters in MMA history in Shane Carwin at UFC 104, with the winner getting a date against then UFC heavyweight champion Brock Lesnar. Unfortunately, those plans suddenly got scrapped and he ended up fighting and beating a debuting Ben Rothwell instead. Well, clearly a major downgrade to what he initially expected, at UFC 110, Velasquez would face his toughest challenge yet as he went toe-to-toe with former Pride heavyweight and interim UFC heavyweight champion Antonio Nogueira, where he scored a massive upset victory in the first round with a well-timed punch to the jaw. This finally earned him the right to face Brock Lesnar for the UFC heavyweight title at UFC 121. To hype up their impending encounter, a UFC primetime episode was aired showing both men's preparation for the fight.
I don't hunt, I don't fish, I don't do anything. That's my life. It's boring.
While still undefeated, Cain clearly looked like the underdog in this fight. Even the tail of the tape shows it. But when the bell rang, a different story unfolded. Brock went on the offensive early, using his knees and trying his best to take down the challenger but to no avail. Eventually, Cain was able to weather the early storm, and once he saw the beast wounded, he immediately went in for the kill, hitting a flurry of strikes, turning Lesnar into a bloody pulp. Soon, the referee had no choice but to stop the fight in the first round, making Cain Velasquez the new, undisputed UFC heavyweight champion. Little did everyone know that this rivalry would only find its conclusion almost a decade later in WWE, but more on that in a bit. Now at the top of the food chain, Cain wouldn't be able to defend his title until late 2011 as a torn rotator cuff sustained during his fight with Lesnar took him out of action for well over a year. Things would only go from bad to worse here, as upon recovery, he would defend his newly won title against a formidable opponent in Junior Dos Santos, who had also been on a hot run himself. And at UFC's first televised cable event on Fox, Cain would get absolutely demolished by JDS at just 1 minute and 4 seconds of the first round, snapping his undefeated streak and losing the belt in his first defense. Interestingly enough, reports came out shortly after that Cain had re-injured his rotator cuff and partially tore his ACL prior to the match, while Dos Santos himself was dealing with a knee injury, so both men were clearly not at their 100%. Regardless, Cain would be out again for a couple of months in order to recover from his nagging injuries. His return, however, would be nothing short of legendary. He was initially slated to face Frank Mir at UFC 146, but that honor went to Antonio Bigfoot Silva instead after Mir was shifted into a title match against Dos Santos. Here, Cain would deliver a masterclass in dominance, beating the big man within an inch of his life and making the arena look like a freaking crime scene as he knocked him out in the first round. with his statement made loud and clear. A rematch with Dos Santos for the title was made official for UFC 155, which took place on December 29th of 2012. Coming into the fight, many had pegged JDS over Velasquez due to his performance in their first encounter. However, Cain quickly silenced all the doubters as he gave everyone another impressive showing. While JDS was able to last until the 5th round, Cain pretty much took control of the fight from the get-go, never letting his opponent catch a breather with his barrage of offense. And after regaining his position at the top, Cain would valiantly defend his title, soundly beating Bigfoot in a rematch at UFC 161st before ending his rivalry with Dos Santos in a rubber match at UFC 166. In April of 2014, a new reality television series known as The Ultimate Fighter Latin America was announced, with Cain and then #1 contender Fabricio Werdum being named as head coaches for the show. The series was supposedly gonna culminate with a bout between the two men for the title at UFC 180. However, injuries would rear its ugly head yet again, and Cain would be pulled out of the scheduled fight, leading to Mark Hunt replacing him for the title bout. Werdum would go on to win the interim championship, but after successfully getting surgery and recovering from his torn meniscus, Velasquez would immediately come back for the title that he never lost. And so, on June 13th of 2015 at UFC 188, the two men finally met each other in the octagon. It was an intense slugfest with both looking evenly matched initially. However, a guillotine choke in the 3rd round would spell the end of Cain's hope of ever reclaiming his title. And after this loss, his MMA career quickly went downhill. While squeezing in a comeback victory against Travis Brown at UFC 200, his 2016 rematch with Werdum never came to fruition as Nevada State Athletic Commission deemed him unfit for competition due to bone spurs. This put an indefinite pause in Cain's MMA career, and so he decided to turn into other ventures, namely taking his talents to pro wrestling. In July of 2018, WWE posted a YouTube video in their channel showing Velasquez training at the Performance Center and working alongside NXT talent. He would even be seen at an NXT live event the previous night. And while this seemed to hint at the former UFC champion potentially signing with the company, nothing ever came out of it, at least for the time being. A few months later, he would make his much-awaited return to the octagon on February 17th of 2019, facing Francis Ngannou and shocking everyone by getting knocked out in under 30 seconds. This turned out to be his last MMA fight as he would formally announce his retirement in October 11 that same year. A tragic end to a legendary career. But going back a few months, in March of 2019, it was announced that Cain had signed a multi-match deal with a wrestling promotion, not with WWE but with Mexico's Lucha Libre AAA Worldwide. Debuting in August 4th of 2019 in a trios match which featured Cody Rhodes and Karrion Kross, Cain would surprise the wrestling world with an impressive showing. Cain looked nimble as heck for a man his size, even delivering a good-looking Hurricane Rana at one point. He would eventually make his opponent submit to the Kimura lock to win the match. Many praised Cain's debut performance, with Cody himself calling the former UFC champ a freak athlete. His next match at the Lucha Invades New York pay-per-view was equally as good, showing more of that Lucha Libre style he's picked up so quickly and winning the match for his team. With 2 impressive bouts in his belt, it didn't take long before WWE came calling to finally bring him in. And on the October 4th, 2019 episode of SmackDown, Cain would make his first live appearance alongside fellow Latino in Rey Mysterio, squaring up against an old foe in Brock Lesnar. He would immediately make a statement upon his arrival, taking down the newly crowned WWE champion with a flurry of strikes, leading to a surprised Beast making a calculated retreat and looking like he's seen a ghost from his past. And so, at the Crown Jewel press conference in Las Vegas, it was announced that Cain Velasquez had signed a multi-year deal with the company and will be facing Brock Lesnar for the WWE Championship in his debut match. Later on SmackDown, the two would trade barbs to hype up their impending match, with Cain promising Lesnar that he would put a matching scar in his face, much like he did in their first encounter. And the following week on Raw, Ray and Heyman would get into a squabble when suddenly Shelton Benjamin came out complaining about Cain's title opportunity. He would then try to bully Mysterio but immediately regret his decision as Cain came out to absolutely manhandle Benjamin. things would only escalate on the go-home SmackDown before the pay-per-view as Lesnar would taunt his challenger, beating up Dominic Mysterio backstage. This turned out to be a well-laid trap, as while tending to not-so-dirty Dom in the medical room, Brock would brutally ambush all three men. The two would face each other one last time during their weigh-in at the Crown Jewel media event, with Cain vowing to vanquish the Beast once again.
No time ever has someone had their debut match here in WWE for the WWE Championship.
Finally, at Crown Jewel, Cain and Brock would clash in what turned out to be one of the worst, if not the worst match of the pay-per-view's history. From the get-go, it was clear that they were trying to work a more MMA-style match, which in turn failed to translate to a good wrestling match. And to make matters worse, it ended in just a little over 2 minutes, with Cain tapping out to a Kimura lock from Brock Lesnar. To add even more insult to injury, the Beast would continue to hold the submission on his fallen prey. This forced Rey Mysterio to intervene, hitting Lesnar with a chair, which only seemed to anger him even more. And after flinging Rey out like a freaking child, Brock would rain down chair shots on Cain's back and deliver an F5 as an exclamation point, finally exorcising the ghost of his past. This embarrassingly short loss turned out to be Cain's first and only televised match in WWE, as he only worked one more dark match teaming with Humberto Carrillo against the OC before disappearing altogether. Later reports would reveal that he was actually dealing with a leg injury during his match with Lesnar, with the belief being that Cain would have to get surgery, to which the man himself later denied. Come 2020, Cain was set to make his grand return at that year's Royal Rumble, even announcing his entry in an interview and his plans to eliminate Lesnar. Sadly, he never got that chance, as he was pretty much put on the shelf until the end of his run. And in April of 2020, he would be released from his contract, becoming just one of the many casualties of the massive pandemic budget cuts. Once the pandemic had died down, Cain would return to AAA in Mexico and wrestle in another multi-man match, before his life took a dark turn as he was arrested and charged with attempted first-degree murder after allegedly shooting a man who was accused of sexually abusing his son and instead hitting an unintended victim. He was incarcerated for almost 9 months before being granted a $1 million bail. After getting released from prison, Cain would later return for one more match with AAA in December of 2022, and as of today, he's still awaiting trial after pleading not guilty. It remains to be seen when and if he'll still be able to fully return to wrestling in the independent scene, but sadly, his chapter in WWE is more likely than not closed for good. So how bad was Cain Velasquez in WWE actually? If I was to rate his run on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm giving it a 1 out of 10. Let me explain why. I mean, he was in WWE for barely 6 months and had one crappy pay-per-view match. That pretty much sums up why I can't give it any higher than a 1. It looked like he was brought in for that single special attraction match with Brock, but after that flopped, Creative didn't really have anything else for him to do. And that's a shame because he showed a lot of promise during his time with AAA and could have had at least a decent mid-card run in WWE if he was just given more time to develop. Sadly, a combination of bad timing, injuries, and some backstage heat ultimately ended a WWE career that never really got started. Anyway, if you watched this video all through the end, let me know by saying Cain deserved better in the comments below. And if you wanna see another failed WWE signing, check out the next video in your screen. See you there.